Hey everybody, I am back for a brand new video, and thank you so much for joining me. First off, let me start by saying happy Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving. I hope everyone had some good turkey to eat, along with some stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, corn, whatever you like to eat during Thanksgiving dinners, alright? I don't really do this whole stuffing stuff. I only ate turkey, corn. We had cream style corn for us, and mashed potatoes and gravy, and some biscuits, or some rolls in general. But that's what I ate. So I hope everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving. Let's really get into the video, okay? Alright. What am I going to be discussing? Well, I know. I've talked about it so many times, and I've mentioned it 100 times in practically every video I talk about it, that I know I probably kind of drive people crazy to the point where they're literally begging me to literally stop talking about this. So I can understand if people just want to get in the comment section and just start blabbing off and saying, like, dude, can you please stop talking about this? Talk about something else, please! And don't worry, even though I'm going to sort of discuss something about it, it's not going to necessarily be the exact same thing. I'm going to add in something that might actually make a little bit more sense in general. But whether or not that's actually going to be the case really remains to be seen. So, you know, it'd be best to just get into the whole video of it, and then you'll understand where I'm basically going at, okay? Alright. So, yes, this will be another video on this whole glass aspect of this moon goddess thing that I've sort of been talking about, and how I've sort of been using Nami as the main focus of it, right? How I've been using Nami as the key figure, and who I think could actually have this Stealth Fruit ability itself, right? Now, sure, I'm not going to necessarily sort of argue or say that other potential people could be worthy of it as well, but it's like I always feel like Nami is the best one to represent that, okay? And really, if I had to like give a good reason on why Nami in general, is really when it comes down to how Oda, it sort of comes down to how Oda is sort of like portrays Nami in a unique way, and how Nami in some cases, how you can see how she's like similar to Luffy in the regards, but she's also completely different from him, alright? So think of this instance like, you know, how Nami can sometimes like act like Luffy, not in the same way how Luffy can be rambunctious and wild, all this like that, and like be a bit headstrong and go into crazy difficult situations without thinking, but in how, you know, Nami can sometimes mimic or reflect on how excited Luffy can potentially be, alright? It's more like she's sort of reflecting off of what he is potentially doing in those senses, but not in necessarily everything he actually does, okay? And when you look at it in general, another aspect of it is how, you know, how Luffy is always someone who obviously bounces back from something. Nami is fragile in the sense of how, like, she can be easily broken, but not in the sense of her spirit is broken, alright? I feel like her spirit is actually much more stronger. It's more of like her body herself. Like, it's not necessarily as tough as Luffy's is, to the point where he can easily take as many hits as possible and always come back from them. Sure, they may hurt him, but he always tries to bounce back from it, okay? And Nami herself, while she doesn't have that same resilience of how Luffy is in regards, she does try to do her best to always fight back, to never really give up, and to always stand by her friends' sides, and to really stand for the point of their dreams, alright? So that's always something to really focus on, okay? And another aspect to really go over why I think Nami can be really interested in this is how Oda himself has always wanted Nami to originally join Luffy first. How Oda originally wanted Nami to be the first person to join Luffy's crew. Unfortunately, there was a bit of changes in the plan, and the whole, you know, the whole thing, like Zoro basically become the first mate of it all, okay? So I think that could be a really unique thing, and how even when you look at original prototype designs like that, and how, you know, the original romance on stories like that, you could even look at Oda's original name for Nami herself, Anne, which originally was going to be one of the original prototype names for Nami before he officially settled on Nami itself, right? So that can always be something as well, alright? So it's really not so much of like a good argument and to just go off of that, but it's just something to really feel necessary because of it, okay? But this isn't really what that video is about, okay? No. But what is this video actually going to be about in general? Like, what am I actually going to be discussing? What am I actually going to be discussing, okay? Well, we all know, if you've seen my videos on this topic before and how I mentioned it before, I've gone over the whole general aspect of this whole glass ability of it, but also the potential idea of like having electrical based powers or lightning based powers, okay? And I sort of gone off of that as how the Luffy Stealth Fruit, the Gomu Gomu no Mi, or the Hito Hito no Mi Maranika, whatever translation you want to use, it doesn't matter, okay? How, you know, his whole idea is being the sun god, okay? How he literally has the power, or is able to basically manipulate fire in some sense, okay? Now, sure, it's not necessarily the same kind of fire that you might see how Elvin can do, or how Ace or Sabo could do with the Marinero Nami, okay? But he's able to create a fire, right? And be honest, when this whole idea was first established, when this whole ability was first done, we always thought that Luffy was just creating friction with his rubber body, right? He was just basically creating friction itself, okay? But no, it does seem like the whole idea of this fire-based attack might actually come from the whole idea of him being the sun god Nika itself, okay? And to really go into that, with this whole idea of the glass thing, and Nami always having some kind of like connection to thunder or lightning in that sense, right? Especially how Oda has potentially sort of given the idea that Nami has some kind of a crazy thing when it comes to the weather, right? She's literally the navigator who has like very unique traits to very sense the weather and to basically tell when something is wrong or when something is right, okay? And you can even look at other examples or other things in general, such as Nami having Zeus as part of her arsenal weapon now, okay? Zeus being the Thundercloud homie that was created from one of Big Mom's souls, okay? And you can even add in the whole idea that Oda answered an SPS question that he was going to give Nami, if she were to have the Devil Fruit, he would potentially give her the Gorogoromi Inaru's Devil Fruit, basically becoming a lightning human, okay? So that's something to really consider here, okay? So I talked about it before, and I mentioned that the whole idea of Nami having the whole lightning-based ability for this whole glass fruit ability kind of makes sense to keep her main element ability with her, okay? However, there's another element that I think could really work for the sense of glass, and it does actually make a little bit more sense in general, okay? But we could also argue and sort of throw in that it may even be possible that both of these elements can occur, or maybe even neither, okay? So what is the second element that I think could actually work and does actually make sense when you really get into the whole aspect of what I'm going into, okay? Well, the other element is ice itself, right? Now, yes, this is not necessarily to be confused with the whole idea of Aokiji's Devil Fruit or Kuzan's Devil Fruit, the Hihi no Mi or the Chili Chili Fruit, okay? Which does transform his body into ice itself, right? He literally becomes an ice human, okay? So this is a very different concept of that, okay? It's not necessarily saying that the whole Devil Fruit ability itself turns the user's body into ice, but it's the idea that they get a glass body that is able to manipulate, like, or basically do ice-based abilities itself, okay? That's sort of the aspect of what I'm providing, okay? Alright, so where can you really get into the whole idea, alright? And where can we really start, okay? Let's start with this, alright? Oda has made lots and lots, well, maybe not lots and lots, alright? Maybe I shouldn't over-exaggerate, right? But he's made quite a few color pages and color spreads where the Straw-Hats are eating ice cream, okay? And not to mention, he created 2 of them that have Nami as a giant character, okay? So literally 2 color page spreads, Nami is literally a giant, okay? And I'm just going to say right here, if by any chance, if Oda makes a third version of that ad, where he makes a third version where the Straw-Hats are eating ice cream and Nami is a giant once again, I'm just going to say it right here, okay? Oda, if you have a thing for giant Nami, okay? If you really do, just go ahead and make her a giant, okay? Go ahead, retcon your whole story that Nami is a giant now, even though it logically might not make any sense, right? So if we are somehow going to, be in Elbaf and we leave Elbaf, okay? And if Nami does not eat this whole Devil Fruit and it doesn't actually go into what I'm expecting or what I'm literally thinking about, but if Oda really wants a giant Nami, then go ahead, Oda, right? Make her a giant, even if you have the whole retcon situation and it's like just something you want to do. We'll learn to accept it. We'll learn to get over it. But you know what? If that's really what you want, fine. I'll be okay with that, okay? Whether or not Nami is a giant or her normal size, I'll still take Nami as she is, okay? I won't lie about that, okay? Alright. Well, let's actually continue, okay? So, when we've actually discussed, and when I've actually mentioned this whole glass thing before, one thing to really go over and how I sort of talked about and sort of gave the idea of this Devil Fruit itself making sense is one thing like this, okay? So, I mentioned before in those whole color spreads pages and stuff like that, is that when you actually look up the word ice cream in Sweden, which is the nationality that Oda chose to represent Nami if she was in the real world, okay? Ice cream in Sweden translates into glass, okay? Glass, right? Which in English is based on the substance glass itself, okay? Now, the Japanese word for glass is garasu, okay? And depending on the actual translation itself, glass can have different translations, right? You can also look at Hari for an example, okay? And you have to also know the difference in the kanji itself, because depending on the kanjis, hari can translate into many different things, okay? So you have hari, which can be translated into like glass or crystal, but you also have hari, this kanji, which can also translate into needle, okay? And we all know how Oda has given Nami to represent needles in some ways, okay? Matter of fact, when Nami first agreed to join Luffy and Zoro when they first met, Nami did help sew Luffy's hat back together, okay? You can even look how Nami fought against Miss Doublefingers, who has the Toga Toga no Mi, or the Spike Spike Fruit, okay? And you can even look at how recently in the whole Lego Kingdom, where Nami and Straws were at in general, or basically the East Blue crew, how Nami took down the hedgehog that was chasing after her, okay? And it was basically revealed that the name of that hedgehog itself was called the Needle God, okay? So there's always something with this whole needle aspect of it, okay? And it's really hard to necessarily say. I've given the whole idea is that Hari could be the name of the moon goddess, but for all we know, Hari could actually be Nami's biological name. That could literally be the name that her parents actually gave her, and Oda has always been trying to, like, loop it in some kind of crazy way, okay? Alright. But let's actually go over some other unique things, okay? So let's go back to this whole Sweden ice cream thing to go over, okay? Alright. So, as I mentioned before, right? Ice cream in Sweden is glass, okay? Glass, okay? However, when you're really focusing on the substance of glass itself, in Sweden, it would be GLAS, right? Which is actually the same translation that is sort of borrowed from the Dutch itself, which is actually something very interesting when it comes to the whole Japanese translation of it, okay? Alright. Hold on. Alright. So, as I mentioned before, right? Glass in Japanese basically translates into garasu, okay? Which is actually borrowed from the Dutch word glas, okay? Which, interesting enough, just like Luffy's Del Fruit, the the word gomu is actually borrowed from the Dutch word gom, okay? So I think that could be very interesting. But when you actually look up the situation of like the Swedish word for glass or ice cream in general, it's actually borrowed from the French word itself. The French word glace, okay? Which when you actually look up the word glace itself, in terms of like the French translation, you actually get things such as ice, but it can also translate into glass, mirror, or radiance, okay? And that even further adds, when you actually look up the whole word glass itself and the possible words that it can be related to, such as shine, shimmer, and glow, okay? And that sort of goes over the whole idea of how I sort of given the idea that another name that we can actually see for this is the Nico Nico no Mi, okay? Which Nico Nico is an onomatopoeia for smiling. However, the main idea that I was going to go over with is basing it off the Nico Nico calendar, okay? Which in many English contexts, you would basically translate it as the mood board, right? Now, Nico Nico itself does not mean the word mood, okay? It's just going over the idea of how the Nico Nico calendar basically is something that is used, such as like in job things, to help track or keep track of people's moods of how they feel that day, right? Such as being happy, sad, something to really work with, okay? And mood boards are basically seen as a very unique trait of that, which basically follows that pattern, okay? And Nico itself can also be the word for sunlight, okay? So it kind of fits the whole bill, and even when you look at the whole idea of glass itself, representing the moon itself, when it comes to light, doesn't have its own light. Moonlight is just reflected sunlight off the sun, okay? So it really does seem to be a good fit for that, and even though it is a crazy stretch, it's just something to really throw in. So yes, really looking at it in general, while the whole lightning-based ability and thunder, whatever you want to consider, does make a lot of sense, you have to really stop and consider here is that, ice could also potentially be a good candidate as well. Now, yes, that is very different from Nami's based ability, right? That is very different for what Nami is basically known for, right? Lightning-based attacks is really her main strong suit. Now, she has used other things as well, right? When it comes to the weather is her main forte, right? But when it comes to attacks, really like letting out an attack, she really prefers lightning-based attacks, which makes a lot of sense because it's her strongest arsenal, especially going up very tough opponents. So that does make a lot of sense. But when you really look at it in general, and the whole idea of glass itself, and look at like the translations of like glass, ice cream and all that, you actually discover how, interesting enough, some of these words have very unique traits in themselves that have connections to each other, okay? I mean, such as both glass and ice itself, both being amorphous materials themselves, okay? Sure, they're very different in terms of like how they are made and how they come into existence, but they do have very unique traits in themselves that are almost very similar, but at the same time, they're completely different, okay? And some have even sort of given the whole idea of when you look at the whole meaning of glass and its whole origin, some sort of given it as the fact of being like some kind of like new form of ice that does not melt, like some kind of crazy new form of ice. So let's actually continue on with the video itself, okay? So here's something to really go over, okay? And I actually mentioned this before, but just for the sake of it, I'm going to mention it here, okay? So I have given the whole idea as that I can see Gara Gara being a good name for the Delpher, okay? Whether or not, like, you know, Gara Gara or even Nico Nico, whatever one is actually considered to be the false name or actually the name given to sort of represent the Delpher itself, it all depends on how it actually occurs, okay? I would actually go with the whole Nico Nico one because I feel like it'd be very interesting to give the whole idea and to keep the whole fan theory that we're going to get the 2-9 Delpher pretty soon. And we also have to keep this in mind here is that it could also be possible that it's going to be 9-2 and not 2-9, but I think 2-9 would be much more suitable, okay? Alright. But let's go over Gara Gara in a sense, okay? So Gara Gara, when actually looking it up, okay? So Gara Gara is an onomatopoeia which, oddly enough, can have multiple meanings depending on the onomatopoeia that is used, okay? One example can be such as empty, okay? Such as like an empty room, right? Like this room is not crowded, okay? You also have like rattle or gargle, okay? Another thing that you look at is how the katana or the hiragana, depending on what you're using, gara is also very similar to kara, okay? Now, kara is actually something very interesting here, is actually when you look up the kanji for kara itself, or actually one of many kanjis for kara, is this one right here, which also is the same kanji used for sora, which means sky, okay? Sora is sky, kara basically means something empty, okay? But it can also mean something as false as well, okay? And oddly enough, this whole kanji that's used can also be used to represent other things as well, okay? The same kanji can also be used for things like suku or aku to become empty or even to become free. And interesting enough, suku, another translation with a different kanji, can be read as to be transparent, okay? Transparent, such as the word meaning to see through, okay? That also makes sense in how you see how Absalom's Delphoot, or the one that's in terms of like Shiru's hand now, I do apologize if I'm butchering these characters' names, how he has the clear fruit, which in Japanese would be the Suke Suke Nami, okay? So overall, really thinking about it, you know, you could actually really consider the idea, okay? You know, Luffy being the sun god, having the powers of fire does make sense. And the whole idea of this whole glass thing, if the glass is to represent the moon itself, and while the moon is not necessarily like in terms of like the coldest thing, you would probably establish and say that it would be more reasonable for this whole ice-based abilities to be more focused on like the ice giants themselves, okay, rather than the moon itself, okay. But there are icy moons, right? Like the Earth itself is not the only moon out there, okay. Like each planet, well, not all the planets, but other planets do have their own moons in their own solar system, right? So there are going to be icy moons out there, okay. And to really go over here and how, you know, you get the whole idea of like fire itself. Fire for the sun god, ice for the moon goddess, or moon deity, whatever you prefer, okay? Does make a lot of sense. And even further add in that and how you look at the whole context of how, you know, fire and ice, two polar opposites that can also be very unique with each other, are that while they are completely different, they are something that is basically needed. Right? There is something that exists. There is something that we have to live with. Something that we just have to accept. Okay? Now, yes, I have mentioned before, and even in this video, that I would prefer Nami to keep the whole idea of the whole lightning-based abilities much better, because it's always been a part of her, and I think it makes more sense. Now, yes, we could throw in the whole idea that maybe she'll get both these elements, and it'll be something to actually add in. Hard to say, but it's just something to actually discuss, okay? Alright. So overall, it's really just hard to assume and to suggest anything out of this whole crazy theory I'm talking about. It might not even occur. It might not even happen. It's just something I feel like could be really worthy and something to really discuss, okay? Alright. So, that's basically it for the whole main context of what I'm actually discussing here, okay? That's the main focus on what I really want to discuss for this whole video. So I hope everyone enjoyed it very much, okay? Alright. So before I really end off the video, I think I'm just going to add in a couple other things just to throw them in for the sake of it, okay? So why can we really consider Nami to be worthy of being like a goddess itself, okay? Well, you could look at many different things, and it really depends on your opinion of it overall, okay? Like such things as this, okay? Like Nami being referred to as a goddess by many characters, like Sanji himself, okay? You can also look at the fact that Oda himself even stated that Nami had like a godless, like a godness or like a queenliness vibe to her, okay? You can even look at such as like, say for instance, right? The Japanese word kami means god, okay? And Nami's favorite thing that she likes to eat, the tangerines, which in Japan the translation used is called mikan, okay? If you remove the n from mikan, then you actually get mika, which when you like reverse the spelling around like that, you can get kami as a translation, okay? And kami, as I mentioned, basically means God in the sense, okay? So it does make sense. So overall, it is hard to really assume anything all because of it. And I might just even be like throwing things in randomly that's never going to occur. And I imagine that's what most people are actually thinking, okay? So yeah, that's all I really got for this whole Nami video. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. You all have a great day. And once again, I mentioned in my last video, but I'll mention it here. I have started a Blue Sky page, so feel free to follow me on there. I still have my Twitter page, and I'm going to have a link to both pages down below. So feel free to follow me when you want, and I'll have my videos uploaded to those. That way, I can get them spread out in case anyone comes across them and they might want to see them, okay? If you like the video, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit notification bells, and feel free to share the video if you feel like it needs to be shared, okay? So thank you so much. You all have a great day, and here's one last picture of Nami to end off the video. So thank you, goodbye, have a good night, everybody.